Morning and good evening, everyone. I'm Melody. Thanks for joining us today, and also happy Buddha's birthday to everyone who's listening. Very special day in Asia. So welcome, Steve. Um, Thanks for joining us from New York. I know
Thank
it's
you.
quite
It's great to
late.
be
Yeah, we know it's quite late there. So thanks for making the time. Yeah, very excited to be speaking to you and doing this interview today. We as Spartan, we invested in Arbitrum, I think back in 2020 or 2021, really early when it was when roll-ups are still only ideas. And now today, if we look at all the scaling solutions on Ethereum, I'm very proud to say that Arbitrum is the biggest, most user, most TVL, most apps, best ecosystem Ethereum L2. So we're really proud to have bet on the right horse. You have to say that. Um, so I would love to, first of all, want to hear from you directly. How did you win this competition? Because it's not like the other, or I guess the biggest competitor, right, is the optimism stack. They had a lot of successes and great biggest investors as well, right, in the space. What did Arbitrum do different that you got to become the biggest L2 on Ethereum right now?
Yeah, hey, that's a great question. And, I don't really know the answer exactly necessarily of what the secret was, but I can tell you a lot of things that were important to us and things that we did that I think were maybe different than some others. Number one is we always had a very tech first focus. So when Arbitrum launched in 2021, um, after Spartan initially invested in us in that round, um, the technology was already fully built out in the sense that the security proofs that are critical, the fraud proofs, if you've heard the term, this is the security proofs that are critical to optimistic rollups. Those were live and in production, and there was iteration over the years, of course. So in 2022, we launched Arbitrum Nitro, which was a very, very big update, but it was always tech focused first, and everything came from the technology. And that was, I think, one thing that was not compromising. It's important because in the blockchain space, a lot of this is philosophical around why we're here, and it's important, right? It's we're here because we believe in decentralization, we believe in censorship resistance, we believe that the blockchain has real benefits to offer users, and growth is important too, but only secondary to those benefits, right? So if centralization, if we were going to centralize the system and then sort of grow it, that's not very important. That's not very exciting. It's much more exciting to have these decentralized principles, and that's number one. And only once those are there to prioritize growth of the chain, that's something which I think the Arbitrum ecosystem did, but very importantly. The other one, which is a big one, is the Arbitrum ecosystem has a very friendly ethos around it. So it's collaborative, it's friendly, even among competitors. There's always an air of friendliness and willingness to work together. And I think this stems way back to Arbitrum's initial launch. We did something called a fair launch. And this was the idea that all applications are going to go live at the same time. So no application got priority treatment, even if you were sort of the biggest in your category on layer one, it didn't mean you get priority treatment on layer two. I always like to say on day one, at least three DEXs went live. So Uniswap was live,
Mm.
SushiSwap was live, and another DEX called Swapper was live. And the idea was, and if you look today, Uniswap is by far the leading DEX at Arbitrum, and actually recently celebrated a milestone of doing $150 billion of transaction volume in Arbitrum. But the idea was that we're not going to be the kingmakers there. Again, this is an open platform; it's a decentralized platform, and Uniswap will do really well because they will do well. But it's not for us to decide who wins and who doesn't. And that air of openness and fairness and collaborativeness in the ecosystem, I think, is extremely important. It's in the spirit of crypto, and it's something very, very special about the Arbitrum ecosystem. So those are two things I think that definitely contributed to success: the technology first focus, and also the fact that it's just a very pleasant place to build and attract the builders. And then a lot of it is also, I think, just network effects. So liquidity breeds liquidity, and apps want to be where other apps are, particularly in DeFi, where synchronous transactions or transactions that involve many different apps, calls to different apps synchronously and building together and building on top of other applications in tapping into liquidity of other applications is so important. I think this was a very, very big theme.
And very insightful. Yeah, thanks. I like what you touched upon on the fair launch. I was thinking you're gonna say the token fair launch, but you actually mentioned for the apps. Um that's definitely something I don't think people think enough or hard about is really supporting the builders. I don't know if I mean, just actually, I was very proud because when I spoke to an infrastructure provider who look at all the L2 and all the rollups, and they kind of do this as a service, right? Roll up as a service team, and they told me Arbitrum has the best tech, most enterprise grade ready. Um, I was like very proud to hear that. It's like everything, yeah. The brand wise, you can be confused, but on tech wise, Arbitrum has the most mature toolings and everything. And I think that's really important reflection of what you said, is building allow a lot of builders to come and also focus on the tech. I also want to ask you about, because Arbitrum for me, one thing about Arbitrum for me, it's very confusing. It's all these versions of Arbitrum, right? You have Arbitrum Nitro One. Now we mentioned the Stylus and Bold. And if you look at the OP stack, right, it's almost like they have their own thing and everything else launched by somebody else. So tell me about why you choose kind of launching your different versions of Arbitrum to serve, right, different purposes. Like, how does that, like, why did you choose this way? And why is this
Yeah,
better?
so there's a lot of different terminology here. Maybe that's better, maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. But let me sort of break it down and explain what these different words mean. So when Arbitrum initially launched, today we call that the Arbitrum Classic Stack. So in 2021, in August 31st of 2021 was an Arbitrum initially launched to the public that was running what then we just called Arbitrum, but today we call the Arbitrum Classic Stack. 1 year later, and the chain, by the way, is called Arbitrum One. So the chain was running technology, but the chain also has a name. The idea is you have a technology stack, and you can also have many different chains running that. Fast forward to today, there are dozens of Arbitrum chains in production, and each one has its own name. Some of them are Arbitrum public chains, others are launched by partners, and they all are named chains. So the name of the initial chain that went live, and this is the chain that is many people just call Arbitrum, but technically the name of that chain is Arbitrum One. 1 year later, there was a very big tech upgrade in the chain, and we upgraded it to run the Arbitrum Nitro stack. So Arbitrum Nitro is not the name of the chain; it's the name of the updated technology stack that's actually today still powering every Arbitrum chain. So every Arbitrum chain today, whether it's an Arbitrum One, or one of the Orbit chains, or a different chain that's running the Arbitrum technology, it's all running the Arbitrum Nitro stack. In 2022, another thing that happened right around the time they launched Nitro was there was a desire to have a second chain in the ecosystem that was really optimized towards gaming and social applications. This was 2 years ago, and the difference of this chain was that it put data off-chain and had an off-chain data availability solution. Today, there are many, many off-chain data availability solutions. Many partners and others have launched. People are familiar with like EigenLayer,
Yeah.
EigenDA, and Celestia, and Avail. There are lots of these. But one of the very first, and it's been in production for 2 years now, alternative DA or data availability solutions was what we call Arbitrum AnyTrust. And the initial chain that ran that was Arbitrum Nova. So now there are two chains in 2022. There's Arbitrum One and Arbitrum Nova. They're both running the Arbitrum Nitro stack. But Arbitrum One puts its data on Ethereum. Arbitrum Nova uses alternative data availability and therefore reduces costs significantly. And that's, again, been in production for years now and still a premier data availability solution. If we fast forward to today, there's a program called Arbitrum Orbit. And this is the idea of there are these public chains, Arbitrum One and Nova, and you could think of this as like planets orbiting the sun and the solar system. And the idea is it's not limited to those two initial planets, but any developer today can go ahead and actually launch their own planet into production. They're all part of Arbitrum. They're all running the Arbitrum Nitro technology stack. They'll have differences. Some will post their data on Ethereum like Arbitrum One. Some will post their data to a data availability committee like Arbitrum Nova. Some might use a third-party data availability solution like EigenDA or Celestia, etc. But they're all running the core Arbitrum Nitro stack. And today, there are actually dozens of these chains that have been publicly announced. I'm aware of at least 36 chains that are publicly announced
Wow.
running the Arbitrum Orbit technology. And the really cool thing is most of these Arbitrum orbit chains are, just to get a little more complicated with terminology, there are three types of these chains. Most of them are what we call layer 3 blockchains. So where Arbitrum is a layer
Mm.
2 because it's built on top of Ethereum, many of these are actually blockchains that are built on top of Arbitrum One. So you have layer 1 is Ethereum,
Oh.
layer 2 is Arbitrum One, and then you have all these other blockchains built on top of Arbitrum One. Some of them, some of these Arbitrum orbit chains in this orbit, solar system are actually layer 2s that are also built directly on Ethereum. And the most interesting thing is there are Arbitrum layer 3s that are actually built on top of other blockchains. So if you'll extend the analogy, you can imagine these are moons to other chains. So for example, one of Arbitrum One's competitors is called the base blockchain on the
Yeah,
OP stack. And one of their largest layer 3, they have a few layer 3s as well. Their largest layer 3 is a chain called Degen chain.
that's
And
right.
that is actually running the Arbitrum Nitro stack as well. That is actually also an Arbitrum orbit chain because there's a realization today that the Arbitrum Nitro technology stack is the most powerful technology stack to run a blockchain, a layer 2 blockchain or layer 3 blockchain. And a few ways that it stands out, the Arbitrum stack is super fast. So Arbitrum public chains run at about 250 milliseconds, and some of these partner chains, some of these orbit chains run at about 100 milliseconds. So the fast Arbitrum has the fastest response times of any blockchain that I'm aware of. Also, it's super cheap. Also, it's mature, and also it's customizable. These orbit chains are very, very differentiated in what they're doing. So, for example, many of them use a custom gas token. So rather than use ETH as their gas token, they'll use their own gas token, their own token for gas, and the Arbitrum Orbit technology platform supports that out of the box. You can define that you want. And there are other teams that are making really interesting customizations. You have teams that are, for example, there's a team called Phoenix that's building in privacy technology, fully homomorphic encryption into the blockchain. It's an Arbitrum Orbit stack
Mm.
that's privacy enabled. There's a team called Kinto that's building in investor institutional KYC into the platform. So institutions can come and use the blockchain in a regulated in a fashion that's compliant with their regulations. And there are many different customizations that people are making, and that's one thing that stands out about the Arbitrum stack is it gives you the freedom. We sometimes say Arbitrum is freedom because it gives you the freedom to make these customizations, and every developer can. They're all using the Arbitrum Nitro stack, but they can customize it to their needs exactly. So there are a ton of words and a ton of different technical jargon. Hopefully, I clarified some of that here today, or maybe I just confused people more. But hopefully, there was something of value there.
Yeah. Oh no, thank you so much for running us through the history. I hope everybody else got a lot more clarity as well, same as me. It's really interesting, Degen. I didn't actually realize this. I thought Degen just a base chain L3. I didn't realize they also use the Orbit chain stack. So what does that then mean? Like how, so what do they build on base? And what do they use the Orbit chain for in this case, right? Because in anyone, like you said, it's a freedom chain. You can choose and modularize however you want to. This is actually the first time I think about Arbitrum in this modularized world because I always think about the modular chains are the eigenlayers, right? The Celestias, even like a fuel, right? Which is initially the same as the Celestia team. I never actually put Arbitrum in that camp. So very interesting to hear how you describe the tech stack and how modular it can be. So how does that work? So if I'm an app chain right now, I want to launch using Orb Stack, but on another chain. So what do I pick and choose?
Yeah, so there are lots of different customizations you can pick, but some of the basic ones are you're using the Arbitrum Nitro stack. That means that that's the code that is processing your transactions. That's the VM that you're running. That's what's doing your fraud proofs. Everything about your code is Arbitrum, but now you have some choices to make. And those choices range from sort of out of the box customizations that the Arbitrum Orbit deployer allows you to make, but you can also go deep into the code and customize it however you will. But some of the out of the box customizations that every chain can decide on are number one, what token do you want to use for gas? Number two, what is your governance model? Do you want to do fully on-chain governance like Arbitrum One? What token do you want to be? Do you want to govern you? Do you want to do some other form of governance? So you can fully decide your governance model, and there's no requirement to tap into Arbitrum One or the Arbitrum DAO. Each orbit chain has full autonomy over how to govern itself. But the other two that are relevant here is number three is where do you want to put your data? What data availability solution do you
Yeah.
want to use? You can put your data on Ethereum. You can use an Arbitrum AnyTrust data availability committee like Arbitrum Nova uses. Or you can say, I want to use Arbitrum with Celestia, like you mentioned. I could say I want to use Arbitrum with EigenDA. I want to use Arbitrum with Avail. All of these integrations exist, and you can choose whichever one you want. And then the other one, which is important, is where do you want to settle? What is your settlement layer? So do you want to settle on Ethereum? So now you're an
Yeah.
Arbitrum chain that's on L2. Do you want to settle onto Arbitrum One? So now you're an L3 to Arbitrum One. Or do you want to settle onto another blockchain like Base? And that's the parameter you can choose.
I see.
And the idea is you have complete freedom. So Arbitrum is actually, yeah, a very, very important piece of the modular technology stack. There are the default, options that most developers that are building Arbitrum Orbit stacks today are building them on top of Arbitrum One, many of them using any trusted data availability. Some of them are using alternative data availability solutions like EigenDA. Some of them are building directly on Ethereum, so they're layer twos. And some of them are choosing to settle onto blockchains like Base, so they're layer threes to other chains. But this is all fully customizable, and you can choose whatever you want, including which settlement layer. So the idea is the full technology stack you're running, every line of code you're processing is Arbitrum code, but the Arbitrum code needs to post its data somewhere, right? It needs to settle somewhere.
Yeah.
It needs to post its proofs and its data, but also its proofs and its settlement somewhere, and you can choose where that happens. So the stack is very modular and plugs in with all those other pieces that you mentioned as well as others.
Right. Oh, time's going by so fast. You haven't mentioned two more things, Bold and Stylus, very quickly. What are those?
Yes, I'll be super quick on this. Number one, Arbitrum Bold, an exciting update that's currently being discussed in the DAO when they want to launch it. Is we'll do many things in terms of making the validation and the challenge protocol sort of next gen and more efficient. But the best thing to highlight is it will open up validation to everyone. So everyone listening to this call today, everyone running an Arbitrum node will be able to fully validate and participate in the fraud proof mechanism, which means if they see something they don't like, they'll be able to challenge it, which is sort of the ultimate goal in decentralizing the security of blockchains, of layer twos. And Arbitrum Stylus is super cool. And I'll do it very quickly, though. Arbitrum Stylus, you can think of it in two ways. Number one is it gives you new tools, new developer tools. So it gives you the ability to write contracts not only in the EVM, that's not going anywhere. You'll still be able to write Solidity EVM contracts, but you'll also be able to write Rust, C, and C++ contracts on the Arbitrum blockchain. This is a first. No one else is doing this. And it's going to be, in my opinion, revolutionary. And it's not in the way that you have like your EVM contracts and you have your Rust contracts and they're sort of separate. They're fully together. They talk to each other. In fact, on chain, you won't even know what a contract is written in. So for application developers, you might say, okay, I just want to call that Rust library. I want to take that cryptographic library, that C library. You can take legacy code, or you can, make code more efficient by writing in these other languages. And the second part of it is not only will it give you these developer tools, but actually, if you use them, you'll get about a 10x increase in computational capacity, or you can think of it as a 10x reduction in computational cost. So it's a scaling solution, but also a developer tooling solution, which I think is going to open up blockchain development to so many people. If you look at the developers today, there's estimated to be a few tens of thousands Solidity developers, about 3 million Rust developers, 12 million C and C++ developers. And with this upgrade, all of these developers will be able to build on the Arbitrum technology stack, but not as second-class citizens, as first-class citizens, right along the EVM. And by the way, if you don't like this and you want to just continue doing everything with the EVM, that's not going anywhere. This is what we call EVM plus. It's additive to the EVM and just gives you more tools and more scaling options.
Wow, very exciting. I think it definitely, when we speak to a lot of chains, or a lot of applications asking when they choose Ethereum, because they said, oh, at least I can get the existing tools, right? A lot of the new chains that you mentioned in their own languages, it's just making it very difficult for developers to then learn a new language and then build on the blockchain. Then now you're opening this up to mainstream developers as Web3 becoming a bigger infrastructure powering different economies. I think this is very exciting. So the solution is what? It's like a EVM compiler or a compiling something onto Arbitrum, and then they made that possible.
So it's what we call a multi-VM. There's a second VM under the hood being added. So it's right alongside the EVM. There's the WebAssembly or WASM VM. So we're starting with Rust and C++. But really, any language that compiles to WebAssembly can be added with Stylus. I'm sure we'll see Move. I know there are people that are already working on adding Move to Stylus, and that's something which I think is going to be interesting. We'll see additional languages as well. But the idea is that they're going to be now, besides for the EVM, that's not going anywhere. So if you like
Yeah.
EVM, you like Solidity, that's there to stay. But right alongside that, you'll have the ability to code in these other languages that anything that compiles to WASM, but to start with Rust and C and C++. And those two will interact seamlessly. So you'll be able to do synchronous calls between the two. They'll expose the same storage format. You can sort of upgrade a Solidity contract to a Rust contract. It'll be completely seamless for developers, which I think is something that's differentiated and will be massively, massively important for developers and unlock new applications and new developers, bringing them into the platform.
Amazing. All right. We only have, I think, around 5 minutes. I really want to take us back out a little bit, just looking at the overall ecosystem on Ethereum. I mean, exciting to read. The ETF for Ethereum seems like going into the right direction. But one thing we noticed is Fidelity had to be told to remove staking rewards, right, in their application of ETF. Do you feel like, especially you being in New York, right? You are very much in the center of, the U.S., the financial center. What are you hearing about institutions' interest in Ethereum? Has this been a concern of, in general, the proof of stake as a mechanism for, decentralization? I'm surprised, right? This is like a nuanced detail that not many people caught, but I do think it indicates there must be a reason, right? They're asking them to remove it. I'm actually curious whether you have learned anything from that front.
Yeah, so I don't have any exact familiarity with that, but speaking generally, so something that a second thing that we do besides for contributing to the Arbitrum technology. So I'm at Off-Chain Labs, right? So we contribute to the Arbitrum technology stack. We have a second thing that we do as well, is we build Prism in-house. Prism is the leading Layer-1 consensus client. So for example, if you remember the merge from almost 2 years ago now, that the Prism team played an instrumental role and a leading role in bringing the merge to Ethereum, bringing Ethereum to proof of stake networks. So definitely, this is something which we contribute a lot to. What I can say is I'm seeing extreme interest from institutions, and that includes financial institutions. So, for example, financial institutions that have recently launched an Arbitrum. So there's a Franklin Templeton recently securitized via BlackRock. BlackRock via Securitize was on the Arbitrum DAO, also applying for what's called the STEP program for bringing funds on chain. Robinhood and Arbitrum have a very big partnership where any Arbitrum asset is tradable on Robinhood. And those are just the public ones, but there's so much interest. I think at this point, from what I see, in any big institution, it could be a fintech, financial institution, it could be a traditional technology solution. There are people thinking about blockchain, how do we bring parts of their businesses on chain? How do we utilize the blockchain to get the benefits of decentralization and complement their offerings? And this is something which I think has matured over the years. A couple of years ago, these conversations were often very, very simple and a bit unrefined. They're like, okay, let's just take everything we have and move it to the blockchain. It doesn't really make much sense. Today, it's much more nuance, which is like, okay, so there are a lot of things that make sense to do in a more centralized Web2 way, but where can the blockchain complement this? Where can it add this? Where can the blockchain technology and supplement what we're doing? One place we see is gaming. Arbitrum is leading in gaming today. It used to be the gamings were like sort of blockchain first and gaming second. Today, they're gaming first and blockchain second. What that means is it's excellent tier one development teams building games. On Arbitrum, for example, we have dozens and dozens of games, dozens of teams building games, including top developers like Amit from Proof of Play, who was the previous developer of Farmville. Right, really good developers building on Arbitrum, but it's game first and blockchain second. And gaming, fintech, social applications, we're seeing this everywhere. There's a tremendous interest in Ethereum, and a second difference that happened from a couple of years ago used to be that often people were interested in blockchain, but then they'd have these like sort of private deployments like Hyperledger or R3 that weren't on the public blockchain. Today, there's a massive understanding of the value of and interest in Ethereum, Arbitrum, right, the public chains that they can build on. And so I'm seeing record interest in Ethereum, particularly today. And I think the move of proof of stake and some of the updates to Ethereum, like recently EIP 4844, which lower fees and make the chain more stable and predictable, are actually very important and instrumental to bringing these large institutions on chain.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. I I think the 180-degree reverse of SEC's attitude towards the ETF is really promising. Like I hope that will drive institutional adoption of the product, right, and not just as an asset for them to hold on the balance sheet. Yeah, we're almost out of time. I do want to actually touch on one thing is on EigenLayer. What is your view on all this restaking economics? For me, like, it's really good to know and understand that you can also integrate very well with EigenLayer DA. But what do you think about all this AVS? Would you recommend people to use an AVS and launch it on EigenLayer and using Ethereum just for security? Or do you think people should build more on like L2, L3s using
So I think they serve different purposes. Like an EigenLayer AVS can serve many purposes and can be a great solution for many different applications, but it doesn't give you a rollup that's fully secured by Ethereum. One way to think about this is Arbitrum gives you, if deployed correctly, the ability to derive your security from Ethereum, whereas something like EigenLayer allows you to tap into Ethereum security and get a subset of the security from that, which is often very valuable. Like, people talk about, for example, today in chains like Arbitrum, the sequencer sort of posts, you send a transaction to the sequencer sends transactions on chain, but there's sort of a delay there. Could be, 30 seconds to a few minutes of getting that sort of on-chain finality. Using something like an AVS, you can potentially reduce that, where you basically get early sign-off from some Ethereum block producers to get an idea of better finality more quickly. It's not the full Ethereum finality, but you can get something more quickly. So I do think there are ways where this technology bridges. If you're looking to run, where you can bridge these technologies and get benefits from both of them, and I think there are definitely places for AVS, and it's a space that I'm very interested in and think that there's a lot of potential for. But if your question is for launching a chain, there is no substitute for launching a rollup and utilizing a fraud-proof-like system or a ZK rollup system, or one of the two, to actually get have the potential to leverage the full security of Ethereum, or derive your security at least from the full security of Ethereum. An AVS will be a little bit different. I don't think it's not a replacement for that, but there are places where you can slot in that technology and they complement each other well. The sequencer being one example where you can get benefits from that. But ultimately, if your goal is to have a chain that's secured by Ethereum, I think rollups are still really the best and only option to do that.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we're out of time. I felt like we could continue for another half an hour and have so many more questions. Maybe in the next time. Thank you so much, Stephen. It's very helpful to have you walk us through the Arbitrum's history, and I'm excited for all these new things that you're launching as well. Yeah, thank you so much, and
Thank you. It's
hopefully
great to
get
be
some
here.
rest.
Thank you.